Hi guys, welcome to our next topic. We continue business cycles, but with Keynesian theories this time. As you remember, business cycles are about fluctuations of economic activity, and we know there are two parts, two phases we could say. These are contractionary phase and expansionary phase. In the previous video, I presented you some classical theories about business cycles. So the major assumption behind them was that economy itself is stable and business cycles are products of some exogenous factors. Keynesian theories, starting with the original theory developed by Keynes himself, they are all based on the idea that economy is unstable as such. Economy itself is unstable, so the major factor that disturbs the economy is a kind of exogenous factors, a bunch of endogenous factors, internal factors. Additionally, Keynesian theories do not exclude some exogenous influence, but the main thing here is that business cycles are produced by economy itself. So, what are Keynesian theories about? Basically, they are based on two important assumptions. The first assumption is that economic activity is driven by profit maximization. This is something that we acknowledged during microeconomics course, right? We believe that businesses operate for profit maximization. So when we look from the macroeconomic point of view, the general economic activity of the economy is driven by this idea, profit maximization. The second cornerstone of the Keynesian theory on business cycle is investment. Investment is very important here. And according to Keynes, investment is justified by its profitability. As you remember, one of the major assumptions behind Keynesian macroeconomic equilibrium was that investment is autonomous. Autonomous in the sense it does not depend on income. It does not depend on GDP, you could say. But when we talked about macroeconomic equilibrium, we never mentioned what actually investment is dependent from. So investment is dependent by its profitability. In fact, we talk about expected profitability here. Imagine that you are a business owner and you want to build a new factory, for instance. You make this decision if you expect this new factory to be profitable. You don't know that yet because you haven't built it yet. So it's not here yet, right? Your investment is justified by your expectations of profit that this investment would bring to you, to your business. And having discussed those two assumptions, let's look at the mechanism of business cycle when it comes to Keynesian theory of it. Let's start with the contraction phase. What happens in the contraction phase according to Keynes? Well, the first thing here is contraction phase is the situation when supply exceeds demand in the economy. So the economy doesn't grow anymore, it stops growing because demand is not sufficient, demand is not enough, supply is bigger. When supply is bigger than demand, then producers start to compete. Not everyone can sell their production because the production is too big comparing to demand. Competition starts and it gradually increases, and as a part of this consumption, we see prices decreasing. I mean, competition could be a price competition and a non-price competition. Sometimes producers compete without using prices. For instance, Apple is a good example here, right? They do compete with their rivals, but they do not compete using prices. They do not try to make their products cheaper than the products of their competitors. But Apple is a special case. I mean, in many situations, producers use their prices to compete. They try to sell more by decreasing prices. So we see prices decrease, or we could see that prices grow, but they grow at a slower pace, meaning we do not need to observe deflation here. That would be prices that decrease. We can also expect smaller inflation. We can expect that inflation will decrease. So prices will grow, but they will grow at a slower and slower pace. When prices decrease, then profits for businesses would decrease as well. Because generally prices are lower and the total volume, the total output cannot grow. It cannot grow because demand is insufficient. So profits decreases, incomes decreases, and so does consumption. If consumption decreases, that would mean that demand increases even more. There is no other way out rather than start decreasing production. So demand starts to decrease and production follows. It also decreases. Once production starts to decrease, we don't need that many workers. We need less human labor. Therefore, unemployment will go up. People are being fired and unemployment goes up. Unemployed people experience sudden drop in their income. They lose their income from job, and even if they get their unemployment benefits, they are usually significantly lower than their salary was. Income decreases and therefore decreases the consumption. Again, remember, consumption is a very big element of aggregate demand. So if consumption decreases, demand decreases, supply exceeds demand. So we could go back to the first point here in this slide. And competition increases and prices decreases and profits decrease, and so does consumption, and so on and so forth. So we are in a kind of vicious cycle, right? Decreasing both demand and supply, and economy working at a lower and lower level of output. Profits are low, and sometimes even they are not existent. So not only profits are low, they could be simply losses. This bad financial situation does not encourage businesses to invest. On the contrary, it discourages them from investing. You could also say that if they are discouraged from investing, then investment demand would decrease and go to the point one, supply exceeds demand, and so on and so forth. So this is yet another element of this vicious cycle, right? But then at a certain level we hit the bottom. I mean, at a certain level prices are so low that some business owners say, perhaps we can try to tackle those low prices by imposing some new technologies. Perhaps we can accept those low prices if we are able to use new, better technologies that allow us to produce and sell at those low prices and still make some profit out of that. If those low prices encourage at some point introduction of new technologies, then it means that all business premises have to be pulled down, old production lines have to be dismantled. Well, probably the supply will decrease then. If supply starts decreasing in this way, the gap between them two, between supply and demand, starts to shrink. What is more, those old premises will have to be replaced with new ones. To build new ones, we need some kind of investment, so demand for capital goods starts to increase. So this is the contraction phase, how it starts with supply exceeding demand and how it finishes when there are new trends, when there are new ideas of having new technologies, when new premises are meant to be built, when demand for capital goods starts increasing at last. So that would be the end of contraction phase. This would be our bottom, this would be our trough. Now it is time to introduce the concept of accelerator. Because the concept accelerator linked with well-known multiplier effect, yet another part of Keynesian theory on macroeconomics, those two, accelerator and multiplier, will be kind of responsible for explaining this Keynesian theory of business cycle. Look at the table, look at the text that you can see to the right. The idea is as follows. Let's consider a certain business. This business owns some capital resources of the value, let's have 100 of value. The capital decides upon the output. The more capital in the economy, the more output can be produced. The more capital in this business, the more output can be produced by this business. So our assumption will be that $1 value of capital will allow to produce $5 value of output. We know that capital goods depreciate, so we set depreciation at 5% per year. Therefore, we know that this capital, this current capital, will be decreased by depreciation. It can be increased by investment. So annual change in capital is capital minus depreciation plus investment. And that would be the capital for the next period. So imagine the situation when our business has this capital resources of 100 and that allows to produce the output of 500. If we believe this is a good situation, this is what we want to produce, then we take into account our 5% depreciation, which would mean that capital will decrease by 5 every year. We want to compensate that to keep the capital at the constant level of 100 and output at the constant level of 500. So our investment would be 5. Depreciation 5, investment 5. Look, I'm at year number 1. Then we go to year number 2. If we want to keep it, then capital should be 100, output 500, depreciation equals investment, and that's it. The last column, that's the change in investment. Let's consider year number 3. 3 and actually 4, 5, and 6. Let's imagine that we decided to increase our output. We want to increase our output by 10%, and that's not a lot. Moreover, we will not do it over 1 year, but we will spread this increase by 10% over a few years to come. So we want to do it in a very delicate, smooth way. Instead of making investment of 5, which was just to cover the depreciation, starting from year number 3, we want to make investment at the level of 8. So, in the 3rd year, our depreciation is 5, our investment is 8, it's 3 bigger, it's bigger by 3 than depreciation. Therefore, for the 4th year, our capital is 103. This capital of 103 allows us to produce slightly more, 515. The depreciation would be 5%, which is 5.2. Our investment is still 8. And we continue investing at this level of 8 till the year number 7, when we already have this increase of 10% in capital, which allows us to have this 10% increase in output from 500 in year number 3 to 556 in year number 7. Even though we made this change by 10%, quite gradually, and that wasn't a big change, if you look at investment demand created by our business, the changes here are kind of violent. I mean, if we order our investment like machines from some supplier, then for quite a few years we were ordering at the value of 5, let's say $5 million. That was our investment. But come year 3, we rapidly increase it from 5 million to 8 million of investment, which is a 60% increase. That is a very large increase in demand. So for our supplier, it would be quite a stretch to be able to provide us with 8 million value of machines instead of 5 as it was so far. If we are to keep this level of 8 million every year, like year number 3, 4, 5, 6, then it is necessary for us to constantly increase our production, like it was in years 3, 4, 5, and 6, and even 7. So to keep the level of investment unchanged, we had to sell more and more and more. So in the year 7, we are already at 10% increase. So we should be kind of happy. If we are happy, then we say, okay, so we do not want to increase our capital anymore. We do not want to make investment of 8. We go back to our previous investment, which was 5. You can see it in year 7. What does it mean for our supplier? For our supplier, that means that we now order machines for 5 million instead of 8. which is quite a rapid cut down by 40%, nearly 40%. That's quite a lot. But let us imagine that after increasing our production by 10%, we decide that was a bad idea. We don't want that. We actually want to go back to the previous level, output of 500, capital of 100. So what do? Well, actually for next 2 years, this is year number 8 and 9, we do not need any investment. Well, I put 0.1 just to make a number. A very small investment is something that we make, but actually we want to get our capital from the level of 111 for year 7 back to 100, and this back to 100 will be in year 10. So for 3 years actually we do not need that much investment, especially we do not buy over year number 8 and 9. So we have again a very ugly present for our suppliers. First we cut down our investment from 8 to 5, this is in year 7, and this is fall by 40%. Then we cut down from 5 to almost nothing. And we continue over the next year to buy nothing. In the year 10, when we actually got to our desired level of capital, well, we want to keep it. So in the year 10, we want to cover our depreciation with investment. Depreciation being 5 for the year 10, so our investment is 5 again. So again we go to our supplier and say, all right, for 2 years we bought nothing from you, but now we want to buy machines for $5 million, which is again a huge increase. So as you can see, even small changes in our output, like gradually increasing output by 10%, decreasing it by 10% again, so coming back to the previous level, that changed investment demand a lot. So we increased our demand like in year 3, then it was kept stable at the level of 8, then we decreased to 5, then we decreased to close to nothing, then we increased to 5 again. There is a lot of violent changes in investment demand. That's why Keynes claimed this is something that causes instability of the economy. This kind of effect. What is more, the changes in our investment, so violent, get transformed with this multiplier effect, as you remember. Changes in investment would be multiplied by 5, by 7, by 10, depending on marginal propensity to consume. And this effect will be even stronger. That's the source of instability in the economy. So this combination of accelerator and investment can explain recovery and prosperity phase of the cycle. Because when we see increase in investment demand, we will see multiplier effect, we will see increase in income, higher income increases consumption. To cover this consumption, we need further increase in investment. So investment demand grows again, creates additional income. This additional income would create additional consumption, and so on and so forth. So as you can see, this vicious cycle from contractionary phase works the other way around in recovery and prosperity phase. So the economy is boosting itself. This is a positive feedback loop. at a certain level, this ever-increasing demand, because of growing consumption, because of growing investment, implies higher level of capital utilization, and costs start to increase. When costs start to increase, profits start to decrease, and that would result in smaller demand for investment. This smaller demand for investment would bring negative multiplier effects. This negative multiplier effects would decrease demand in the whole economy. And at the same time, the so-called capacity effect of investment becomes very visible in the economy. So we can see that demand is falling down while capacity effect pushes supply up. We've got high supply and lower demand. So we've got the beginning of the contraction phase again. And this is how economy fluctuates according to John Maynard Keynes. One comment on investment. Remember, every investment has two effects. Demand effect of investment is about the fact that if you decide to build a new factory, you create a lot of demand for workers, for construction, for concrete, steel, electricity, all the things that you need to actually build this factory. So when you decide to invest, you first increase demand. Usually you make your investment when demand in the economy is pretty high. So your decision of investment actually makes demand even bigger. If there was some kind of disequilibrium in the economy and the demand was bigger than supply, that will encourage you to make investment. But if you are encouraged to make investment, then the demand effect of investment will increase demand even more, will increase this disequilibrium even more. So this is what breaks stability of the economy. If we have already too much of demand, that creates additional demand for investment and triggers demand effect of this investment. On the other hand, when the factory is over, then demand that you created just disappears. You don't need any concrete more, you don't need any bricks more, you don't need any workers. The job is done, the factory is built. So this demand disappears from the economy. Now the capacity effect appears. Your factory is ready to produce, so you add to the supply side of the economy. So this is what happens when you decide to invest. First you increase demand, then you increase the supply. And obviously there is a time lag between the first effect and the other one, right? Because demand starts when you start your investment. Capacity effect starts when the investment is completed. As you can see, capacity effect requires investment to be positive, right? It could be higher or smaller in some periods, but it should be positive. If investment is positive, then capacity grows. Demand effect requires constant growth of investment. Investment must be bigger, bigger, and bigger. If investment becomes smaller than it was before, then this multiplier effect would be actually negative. Look at traditional business cycle models, especially pay attention to the Ziglar fixed investment cycle. You can see trolls very nicely identified in 19th century and at the beginning of the 20th century. 19, 19, 1905, 1920, 1929. This is this Great Depression with huge decrease in gross domestic product. Then 8 years later, 1937. All right. There are no more dates listed here. So my question is, what happens to business cycles after the Second World War? Do you believe that this could have something to do with John Maynard Keynes and the fact that it was just before the Second World War when he decided to publish his work on macroeconomics? Does it change something in the way we tackle business cycles? Are business cycles, are they as regular as they used to be before the Second World War? I'm gonna ask you to share your views on our platform. Thank you very much for your attention. It was nice as always to make a recording for you. You can hit like if you like that. You can subscribe if you feel we should stay together on our YouTube channel. Thank you for your attention. Bye.